Welcome to Home Gym History. I am not in Pittsburgh. I'm in West Virginia, the home of the Mountaineers, and not far, we're knocking stuff down. And not far from West Virginia University is John Mauser,
Hey.
the Viking, some in his garage. This is the first ever episode of Home Gym History being filmed in someone's home gym.
Very cool.
So thanks for having me, John.
All right. Well, we'll kick it off.
Heck yeah. I recently saw you on Massonomics podcast,
Mhm.
and you mentioned that you're always going to the Arnold. Just looking around your garage, and I'll have a gym tour on my YouTube channel after this comes out on Vintage Weights PGH. You're into so much stuff. So what have you been up to lately?
Lately, well, I do kind of been doing some powerlifting training as far as my general strength stuff goes. I do that twice a week, and then I've been doing a lot of arm wrestling.
Okay.
So we have a team. We started maybe 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago. We started a team here, and we just been getting into that big time. So I go to practice about every other week.
Nice.
Sometimes I go more frequently, but I only actually practice every other week. It beats you up pretty bad.
Okay.
So I think every other week is about as much as I can handle.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I did a pretty, I mean, I didn't do much for it. Eric Hussein, my guest, did a great job on an episode of Home Gym History with the history of arm wrestling.
oh,
And
cool.
he's amazing. If you don't belong to the Facebook group, the Arm Wrestling Archive that he has, check it out. It's pretty cool history that he puts up on there about arm
Okay.
wrestling. But as far as beating you up, is it just, your whole shoulder, your back, your arm? Like when you say beats you up pretty bad,
Yeah, it's mostly the elbow stuff,
Okay.
bicep tendon, ligaments and stuff in
Okay.
the elbow. But there's also, a lot of generalized fatigue because you're using your whole body. It's just your arm is the weak link in the chain.
Gotcha.
So it'll beat you up in general, but man, it'll really, your elbows, it takes a long time to acclimate to it. It's pretty crazy because it's not, like lifting something, the angles you get in and the amount of time under tension you're on.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of kind of like jerking around on
Yeah.
that stuff. And it'll just beat you to death. I mean, I see a lot of people try it and then end up quitting because of the pain.
Sure.
So you have to be really smart. So we kind of have a system for our team practices now. So we have a new person, so we don't just scare them off because they're like, oh man, I couldn't move my arm for a month,
Sure.
you know.
Well, it'd be like if you brought someone into your gym and immediately had them max out their first training session, and then they're sore for 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's the
That
same
kinda
thing,
idea.
but worse.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I've never
So-
seriously arm wrestled. It's on my radar, but what makes me personally nervous is I'm really into grip training, and I think, man, I'm so obsessed with grip training right now that I don't want to like do anything that's gonna put me off track. If that
It
makes
is.
sense.
It is somewhat difficult to juggle both.
Yeah.
Like we practice on Sundays, and then I do grip twice a week, like recently. And I've been trying to do it on Mondays,
Okay.
and it works great the weeks I don't practice.
Yeah, yeah.
The practice weeks, I mean, my hands are so weak the next day, so I'm gonna have to either switch the day or figure something out. It's just not every other week isn't working out.
Yeah.
So, but I will say, when I did arm lifting and grip sport for a while,
Yeah.
Years ago, and then arm lifting is just a mess, for lack of better terms. So I kind of dropped out of that. I don't mess with that anymore.
Gotcha.
So I quit doing a lot of specific grip stuff. I still get grip with the Strongman stuff that
Oh,
I do,
yeah.
but I'm not messing with rolling thunders and stuff.
Grip specific, yeah, implements.
And then I got back into it recently, and just from the arm wrestling stuff, my grip is already better.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
it kind of hurts it in a way, but in a way it makes it better
You
too.
see some carryover.
And I think if you can figure out how to juggle it, which I will, it'll take me a couple weeks to kind of figure it out.
Yeah.
I think it's nothing but helps, and the arm wrestling's actually made my bench press and overhead press stronger. carrying event, like carrying stuff.
Yeah.
It's just so much better. You think your arms are strong and you'll carry stuff a Mauser block or Husafell stone or something, and your arms will give out in those events, but you don't think much of it. Just, oh, my arms got tired.
Yeah.
But after doing the arm wrestling and carrying stuff now, I'm like, man, I've been leaving a lot on the table here. So I think it's done nothing but helped my other stuff.
That makes sense.
It's just you gotta duck your head down and be willing to burrow through when that pain is kicking in, and you're like, oh my god, and you got to just figure out how to situate it into your schedule to where it works.
Makes sense. So where I first found you was Instagram.
Okay.
And it wasn't arm wrestling videos. It was like rolling up a frying pan, walking on glass, like, all these feats of strength, ripping cards, bending things, horseshoes, bending bars, hammers. And for me, as a strength historian, right away, I'm like, oh, this dude, he is like all in on the old time strongman feats of strength.
Yeah, yeah.
So can you first, before we dive into like your home gym history, can you first just say like how'd you get into those specific types of things, the old time strongman feats of strength, all that kind of stuff?
Um, it'd probably be easier if I start clear from the beginning.
Sure, then let's do that. Let's dive way back.
So I started getting into pro wrestling
Uh-huh.
as a teenager, and my brother and I, we realized that you got to look the part. So we started training, but this was a
And when
long.
you say getting into, you don't mean just watching. You mean you're doing it. You're wrestling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we went
yeah.
to wrestling school and did all that.
Oh, awesome.
Um,
So wrestling school, where was wrestling school? Where'd you?
At the time, there was a school in Parkersburg, West Virginia.
Okay,
I don't believe that exists anymore, but
yeah,
that was a long time ago.
sure.
But we started out doing backyard stuff, of course,
Yeah.
and just being crazy idiots and jumping off the roof and stuff. And then,
You're teenagers. You're invincible.
right. And then a friend of ours went to college at Glenville State College, and he just happened to be rooming with a guy that was a pro wrestler.
Nice.
Just like, what are the chances?
Yeah.
And the dude had a ring. So they would set this ring up in this building over on the agricultural campus.
Okay.
And they would do these practices. Well, people started showing up to watch them practice. And he's like, hey, this is kind of like becoming a big thing. Do you guys want to come down here? So my brother and I would drive down and do these, I guess you call them shows.
Uh-huh.
And then eventually they were charging like $2 a head.
Yeah.
And
It got you some experience in front of an audience.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, probably hone those performance skills.
oh, for sure. And one day the campus police came and they were like, will you do a private show for the police here? So we
That's
did a
awesome.
show for it was like the city and campus police and stuff.
Yeah.
And actually that day, this guy came in that owned, I think it was called Doghouse Gym.
Okay.
And he came in and he was like, hey, this is really cool. I want to do a big show for the college for the women's athletics and we'll raise money for them.
Yeah.
We were just backyarders and we were like, yeah, man, sure, you know. So he sets it up. Well, he was a big deal, I guess. And he got in contact with NWA TNA, which was on TV at the time.
I remember them. Yeah.
And they sent their people down. So
Okay.
the backyarders, we kind of opened the show, and then they were like the main event or
main
the big part of the
acts.
show. And there were some big names there. Jeff Jarrett was there. Abyss, I don't know if you remember him, giant dude.
Yeah.
And so when they came down and did that, the guy at the end, he didn't like us to start with because we were backyarders, and he was trying to get us off the show actually. But
Oh,
and he got in an argument with the guy that
Nice.
set the thing up, and
You were
He-
seen as like amateurs.
oh yeah, he's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
we can't have them in the show, and he's like, well, you're going to like, I put this together, like they're in
Yeah.
the show. And
Nice.
at the end, he was like, you guys actually aren't bad. He's like, you just need some like formal training.
Hmm.
So he invited us to his school.
Okay.
So we started driving to Parkersburg and going to pro wrestling school. Well, we started lifting because of that, because we needed to look the part.
Sure.
And, especially when I started watching, it's a little bit different now, but all the pro wrestlers were giant bodybuilder looking
Yeah.
freaks, and it was
Yeah,
like, yeah, man, I want to look like the Macho
Ultimate
Man.
Warrior, Macho Man, all those guys. Yeah.
I didn't make it clearly, but that's
still
what I
got the
was.
size.
That's
It's
what
all
I
right.
was aiming for.
Yeah.
And so we started lifting for that, and then somewhere along the lines, we've started watching World's Strongest Man,
Okay.
And there wasn't, you didn't have the internet back then. So all of our information was coming from like Flex Magazine, Iron Mine, or Iron Man or Iron Mine, I
Iron
can't remember,
Man.
magazine.
Yeah, Iron Man.
And we were just doing those bodybuilder workouts.
Yeah.
But then we discovered Iron Mind and Milo at some point.
Yeah.
So we started ordering the books,
Mm-hmm.
all the, Sons of Samson, Dinosaur Training,
Yeah.
Keys to Progress, all those books, and
Love
reading
it.
them all.
Heck yeah.
So then it was like, okay, well, we can do this strongman stuff too. So we'll have the bodybuilder look, but we'll have the functionality in the ring to be able to pick people up. So it was all about pro wrestling in the beginning.
Yeah.
It wasn't about lifting Atlas stones or any of that. And time went on, and pro wrestling kind of was like, man, sometimes you make $20 at a show.
Man.
There's no money in it. And not
That's
at
a
the
lot of
time.
wear and tear for $20.
Yeah, it was almost pro wrestling's. I will argue it might be the most dangerous activity you can do.
Yeah.
I had a friend that did bull riding. He might have an argument there.
Well,
but
there you go. Yeah.
But
If you
pro
throw stuff
wrestling,
like bull riding or whatever, like those squirrel suit glider dudes
yeah,
that fly
yeah,
down,
that's
all
that's
right.
probably a little. But pro wrestling's one of
Yeah.
the most dangerous things.
Well, at that point, were you actively like, going on tour or doing
Yeah.
this like every weekend, like,
Not every weekend, but yeah, I was driving around and
Yeah.
doing
doing
shows.
gigs and
And
shows.
you get some kind of injury like every show.
Yeah.
I mean, and it could be your fault, it could be your opponent's fault, it could be equipment malfunction,
Yeah.
anything, but you're getting banged up. I mean, bad
And
all the
how
time.
are you getting these shows? Just word of mouth? Or are you like associated with an organization or something that's helping you, hey, calling you up, come out here?
Yeah, so again, there was no internet at the time,
Yeah.
or it was just starting anyway. And so a lot of the time you would go do a show. Well, the wrestling school guy would hook you up in the
There you go.
beginning.
Yeah.
Once you got the ball rolling,
Yeah.
they would say, well, I know this other guy, you can go work
Okay.
for him. And then my brother was doing shows down in Huntington, and he talked them into booking me, and I would talk people into booking him. And
So
it was just a lot of word of mouth and
Yeah.
just like saying, hey, I know a guy, or
Yeah.
hey, a guy knows me, and jumping around that way.
Gotcha.
But there was no money in it.
Yeah.
So I was getting out, and I was like, well, I guess I'm going to go to college. I had no desire to do that up to that point.
Yeah.
So then it was like, well, if I'm getting out of this, what am I doing in the gym?
Yeah.
Like what was the point? So then it was like full blown strongman. I got into competing in strongman. I was doing martial arts this whole time. I've always done martial arts. That was my first true
Oh, cool.
physical activity,
Yeah,
passion that I had, And so I was doing that the whole time, but it was hard because it's hard to find people to train for it.
Yeah.
Because again, UFC wasn't a big thing.
No.
Pride was like the thing that you could buy the DVDs.
Everything you've mentioned, I'm guessing this is like 90s.
Yeah.
Somewhere around there. So yeah, we're
late 90s.
Yeah, so I mean, we haven't even hit smartphones yet in terms of technology, and in terms of like UFC, it wasn't really a thing yet. So yeah, martial arts, you would probably go into a local place, taking, working through your lessons, that kind of thing, I would guess.
Yeah, and then like when I went to college, I went to Kaiser at Potomac State, and there was no MMA place, so I would just grab people.
Yeah.
Be like, hey man, you want to like go spar or something?
And I'm laughing because you're 6'7", something like that, 6'5", probably 3.5 pounds. So it's like, I can only imagine a guy of your size walking up and saying, hey, you want to like fight with me? But in a friendly way.
Well, at the time when I was doing that, I was probably about 250.
Okay.
250, 265. And
yeah, fair enough.
But
this
still,
was 20 years ago,
bigger than most
Yeah.
people, especially most people in college. I was bigger than. So yeah, they were probably like,
Yeah.
But so like I don't really realize how big I am a lot of the time. So I was probably like rolling up on these people. And they're like,
Sure.
But so I was doing a lot of that stuff and begging people to do MMA training and stuff. So then I started doing strongman. So my training kind of became, my strength training was for strongman, but then I was doing conditioning for
Gotcha.
martial arts and stuff. And that was on the forefront, to be honest. I didn't do a lot of competitions as a martial artist, but that
Uh-huh.
was my favorite thing at the time.
Gotcha.
And then as we went on, strongman kind of moved to the forefront, and I started doing more competitions. And once I got to know the promoters and the people in the area that were really into it,
Yeah.
a promoter messaged me and said, "Hey, we got this show coming up. We're doing a truck pull. I need some guys to come down and test out these fire trucks to see what was possible to move or if it's too easy to move."
Yeah.
And
You
I've
don't want
always
to find that
been
out during the competition.
no, no, nobody move. I've seen that happen.
That sucks.
But, and I happen to be pretty good at truck pulls. It's
Nice.
probably it might be my best event ever.
I was looking through your Instagram, and yeah, I mean, you put up a reel not too long ago doing a
Hmm.
truck pull. So yeah.
Yeah, I've always been. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It's just been like some people have that event.
Yeah.
That's always been a good event for me. Um, so I went down to test this thing out, and there was a bunch of us there, 5 or 6 local strongmen testing these things out. And there was a guy named Jim Bassnett, who's
Okay.
an old time strongman. And I'd maybe met him a couple times before, but I wouldn't say we were like friends. We're great friends now.
Yeah.
But he pulled this bolt out, a 6-inch hex bolt, and was like, "Can any of you guys bend this?"
I love it.
And I'd never, I mean, I'd heard about bending nails. You know, when you're
Yeah.
going up through this stuff, you'll hear about the Mighty Atom or
Oh yeah.
whoever, people bending nails. So I'd heard of it,
Love the Mighty Atom.
but never seen it, didn't know.
Yeah.
And nobody said anything. And I'm standing there like, nobody wants to do this. And I was like, well, I have to do this. I was like, I'll try
Yeah.
it, you know. And he gave me these wraps, didn't tell me how to use them or nothing. So I just like put them in my hands. I'm bending this thing like in the hardest way possible, like
Yeah.
8 inches out in front of me and down by my belly button and blowing a gasket. And I finally bend this thing. And I remember thinking, man, that was like one of the hardest things I've ever done. And then I was like, well, if that was that hard, I have to like do it. Like I have to continue doing this.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
So I started getting with Jim, and he started showing me the ins and outs of bending steel.
Yeah.
And then that led me down a rabbit hole. At this point, there was internet. It led me down a rabbit hole to where I started looking up the other feats,
Uh-huh.
and I started practicing tearing cards on my own. I was going to the apartment buildings, and going in and asking the front desk if I could have their phone books,
Nice.
because
Yeah.
they would just get big shipments of phone books for
Yeah,
everybody,
yeah.
but who uses them?
Yeah.
You know, so they would just have them
Yeah,
sitting
here you
there,
go, buddy.
and they'd be like, "Yeah, you could have 10 of them."
That's awesome.
And so I started tearing phone books that way. Went down the whole thing, got some hammers and stuff to lever, and then Jim Bassnett. I don't know how he met him or how that worked, but he knew Dennis Rogers,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and he brought Dennis Rogers to West Virginia,
All
and
right.
we paid and did a weekend seminar with Dennis Rogers.
Okay.
So if you look at the lineage, I'm under Dennis, who was under Slim the Hammerman, who was
Yep.
under the Mighty Atom.
Yeah, yeah.
So he showed us all kinds of stuff, and I still talk to Dennis, and we go to the old time strongman picnics and stuff.
Very cool.
But he showed me how to roll frying pans, different ways to bend nails, tear cards, do all that stuff. The human hammer, slamming the nail through the board.
Yeah, yeah.
And once I met him and did that, then it was kind of like, oh, well, I'm going to go full tilt into this. And that's when I started doing, I always call them exhibitions, but
Yeah.
old time strongman shows
Yeah.
where we're getting paid, or we're going to a festival and doing these
Sure.
exhibitions and stuff. And that's really what kind of sent me down the whole journey to do all of it, because it started with just steel bending, which in my opinion is probably the best base for that.
I've watched a guy I love on Instagram, Feats of Alex. So,
Oh, I know Alex,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I've watched him go headfirst into steel
Mhm.
bending the past year, 2 years. I mean, I think he was into it before that, but he's really into it now. And yeah, so from a distance, I've seen a lot of it. I got a little like starter kit and messed around with it
Yeah,
some,
yeah.
but I've never seriously pursued it. But I agree with everything you said that it's humbling. It's like, you look at this little piece of steel and like, oh, that shouldn't be too bad. And then, oh my gosh,
Oh, yeah.
your entire body, you're exhausted. when you're done trying to fight this thing. So yeah, I agree with what you said. Recently on the podcast, we have a nice lineage here on the podcast. Episode 49 was Ryan J. Pitts from Stronger Grip,
Oh yeah.
and he talked about Dennis Rogers. He talked about Strongman University. He talked about various things that he did over the years with Feats. And then last episode before yours, episode 50, is Indiana Stones, his name on Instagram. So David Keown, and he talked about stuff too. He's in Ireland doing stone lifting research and like finding old stones in Ireland.
Very cool.
So yeah, he's on like a cool mission in Ireland finding these old stones and lifting them. But he also mentioned all these things. So yeah, I didn't plan it this way, but it's been you're part of like a
That's
trifecta
cool.
of like this old time strongman and the way it's progressed and guys still doing it. So when it comes to these feats of strength and old time strongman, I mean, you just went through an incredible strength journey of this prior kind of training in these disciplines, whether it's martial arts or strongman or wrestling. Let's say a guy like me, you know, I'm lifting in my home gym, so my listeners might, you know, have pretty good strength. They're not just like an average dude.
Hmm.
They regularly train, but they've never done any of these things. They've never ripped a telephone book. They've never bent a horseshoe or ripped a deck of cards. What's the best entry point if now they're listening to this episode and they're getting curious, like, oh, I want to try some of this stuff.
Um, I would like to say steel bending, but it has gotten increasingly difficult to just go to the hardware store and buy some of this
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
When I first started, it was easy. I don't know what happened, but I remember just being able to go to like Tractor Supply or
Yeah.
Lowe's, and they would have the perfect 60 penny nails, like exact one. Now you go and they don't really. It's hard to find them. I end up usually having to order them.
Okay.
So I would actually say maybe now the easiest thing to do would be buy my book.
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say you
And,
Forgotten Strength, right?
Forgotten Strength 101.
Forgotten Strength 101.
Eventually there will be a 102.
Yeah, there you go. Forgotten Strength 101, you go through some of this stuff,
Yeah.
instructionally go through it. You teach in your book, which is available on Amazon. I'll drop a link. If you follow the link in my description, it helps me out, by the way, and of course supports the Viking here. But you go through horseshoes, you go through ripping cards, you go through human nail.
Yeah, human hammer. Yeah.
Human hammer, sorry.
Yeah.
Human nail would be the opposite. Let's
Yeah.
let's
Just jump through the board.
yeah, let's not be the human nail. That's ridiculous. So human hammer. So you go through this stuff, but I just meant like if I'm gonna pick and choose this from this array,
Hmm.
you're saying maybe not steel bending,
I would say cards.
maybe cards is a good thing to try first.
If you want to get your feet wet, I would say cards.
Okay.
And in my book, I talk about the different brands of decks,
All right.
and because there's a hierarchy. Like bicycles are
Yeah.
way harder than a lot of other brands. However, buying decks can become expensive.
Yeah.
So you can go online on eBay or there's a website, I think it's called Casino Warehouse or something
Okay.
like that. And you can buy like big boxes that'll have
Oh,
160 loose, just thrown in decks of cards
Uh-huh.
from Vegas casinos.
Like
'Cause-
used, the ones they punch.
Yeah,
like
because they
used.
use them like, I mean, I think maybe
Yeah.
once.
I used to be heavy into poker, and I remember it was
Okay.
kind of cool to get the used ones and stuff.
Yeah. Well, they'll use them for 1 or 2 games or
Uh-huh.
something, and then
They cycle
they'll
them out.
either punch a hole in them or cut the corner off, and they'll throw them in a box.
Gotcha.
And so then you can start the progression just like you would anything else. You could say, well, I'm gonna pull 10 cards out and do 10 cards,
Okay.
and then now I'll try 12, and now I'll
And
try
You
14.
say don't get the bicycles. Is that because of the plastic coating?
Um,
Because like when I was playing poker a lot, we like these slippery, like plastic coated cards
yeah.
versus like the cheap stuff from the dollar store that was just like paper.
The bicycles are more expensive. They're going to be
Okay.
between like $4 and I don't know $7.
So
a
you're
deck.
spending $7 a rip
Yeah.
as well.
Yes.
So that sucks.
So
Yeah.
I would say don't start there, but that is like kind of the bicycles are kind of the standard.
Uh-huh.
Like if you're tearing Mavericks or something,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, so for a show, I would say build up to where you can do bicycles.
Uh-huh.
But in training, I prefer to do cheaper cards
Yeah,
or
yeah.
or buy a box of now some of the casino cards can be as hard or harder than bicycle.
Yeah.
Like I think they were Bellagio cards once.
Oh, okay.
And I could do the whole deck eventually,
Uh-huh.
but
It was tough.
it was
Yeah,
not the
it's a
same.
fight.
I mean, they're like, you could watch them like dust would come out of them.
Oh,
Like they had some kind of it looked like fibers
huh.
woven over each. Like you could, I don't know. I will like really pay attention to what I'm doing. You could see these
Yeah,
little fibers tearing in it, and I'd be like,
interesting.
"What is this thing made out of?"
Yeah,
So some of those can be incredibly difficult,
yeah,
but I like it because you get a giant box with 150 decks in it,
yeah,
and you could just pull 10 out or 12 out or 20, or if you want to go beyond a deck, I mean, you could do 60, 70 cards at a time, two
sure.
decks, whatever you want to build up to.
Okay.
Um, but they're just there,
Yeah.
and if you're training with those, let's say they're bicycle quality,
Uh-huh.
but you can only do like 40,
Yeah.
well, chances are you could grab like a deck of Mavericks and do the whole thing.
Okay.
So once you kind of understand that hierarchy, that progression of the brands and
Yeah.
stuff, you
Yeah.
can start to say, okay, well, if I did 40 of these, I can do 50 of these, or
The same way with other, strength pursuits. If you
yeah,
understand that like a thick-handled dumbbell versus a regular handled dumbbell, whatever you're picking up, one's going to be harder than the other.
oh, for
So
sure,
yeah,
yeah. It's
gotcha.
just a weird
It
progression. It's
is,
not
yeah,
like weight.
yeah.
So you just get used to it. But it's the same with steel bending.
Uh-huh.
I mean, steel bending. There's what's that shortsteelbending.com.
That's where I got like the beginner kit.
Okay.
Yeah, that guy, and it came with like some that were like square
Yeah, yeah.
and versus the round, and then different diameters, of course. And
And he'll put
yeah,
the
he
supposed
does.
strength rating because
Yeah, yeah. He breaks it all out so that you can kind of like work your way up.
yeah,
You know.
the and that's good, especially for a beginner to kind of be able to make that
Yeah.
connection. But
And Iron Mind still sells like the different colored ones. I think the
yeah, they
different
do the white,
the
yellow.
bag of nails. I think they
Hmm.
call it. Yeah.
Yeah, and see, they're just color coded. They
Uh
don't.
huh.
Now people have done strength ratings for them.
Yeah.
Um, my issue with the strength rating is it's kind of a very generic, like it's like you said, a thick handled dumbbell or something, right? Like if I say, well, that dumbbell weighs 150
Yeah.
pounds, you got a pretty good idea how difficult what you could do with it.
Sure.
But if the handle is
Uh
inch
huh.
dumbbell sized, all of
Yeah.
a sudden, all the things you thought, well, I could do this, this, or this, it's
Yeah.
like, well, now I can do like two things with it,
Well,
you
it's
know?
like Ryan J. Pitts that I brought up that was on a couple episodes ago. He said, "Oh yeah, I made these 155-pound dumbbells," but then he followed it up and said, "with 1.5-inch handles." And I was
Yeah,
like, "Oh, well, that's a little bit more of a challenge.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's interesting." So yeah,
So steel is that way because um, they're rating the resistance level given to you,
okay,
but at what point in the bend?
yeah,
So that rating is somewhere between here and here.
yeah, yeah,
Well, where was it?
uh-huh,
Is it from the start? Is it from the middle? Um, and then your leverage changes.
uh-huh,
So in the middle of a bend, like something could be, say 300 pounds of pressure from the start, but it could maybe be 400 later in the bend. But because you have better leverage, that part's actually easier.
yeah,
So the strength rating doesn't tell the whole story,
sure,
and then the length matters. So you could get one that's, well, this takes 500 pounds of pressure to bend, but if it's
yeah,
longer, that 500 is easier.
absolutely, yeah,
So I think the strength rating is good for a beginner and it gives you a good generalized idea, but you do have to start to realize like all these things are not equal.
no,
And so there's a little bit more thinking involved than
yeah.
just, 45s on a bar or than weights. There's a little more to it, a little
There's
more,
technique for sure. I
yeah,
mean, like you said, when you first started talking about this, the first time you tried that bolt, you had it like out in front of you
yeah,
and down by your belly button, and it's like,
yeah,
and when I watch guys and when I've tried myself, I right away I think, no, I mean, close to your body, and you're trying to really get down into it, so it makes sense. Um, but when it comes to these exhibitions that you were talking about,
hmm,
that's 100% like old time strongman style because of the performance
yes,
and the strength pursuit. Because like promoters of different events, like say a strongman event, a promoter of it might be thinking about a performance aspect that this will look really cool for the crowd. If they pull this truck, this is going to look cool. But the athletes in a strongman competition, you're not concerned with performance. You're concerned with, how you are, completing the events and how much you're lifting and how well you're doing athletically. But then when it comes to these exhibitions, now you do have to think about the performance aspect
Hmm.
of it. So do you think you got some of that from the wrestling,
Oh, for sure.
you know, to
For
play to the
sure.
crowd and do
Yes.
that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think when I did pro wrestling, it was I wanted to entertain people. Um, I mean, sure, it's fun doing it, but
Yeah.
the idea of like entertaining a huge crowd's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, so when this kind of popped up and I realized that this could be a real thing, that's kind of what drew me into it was, oh, I can entertain again. And that's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah.
I do the strongman competitions because it's a competition and stuff. And I'm probably an outlier, but I do think a lot of times when I'm out there, like, man, I got to put on a show for these people.
That's cool.
And
Yeah.
uh, I love that part of it.
Yeah.
And it's so that's my favorite part of the old time exhibitions. It's just going out there and the
Yeah.
crowd response.
Well, I mean, I guess to better explain, I just mean you're not planning it. You're the promoter of the
Right.
Strongman shows planning it. So when you're planning one of these exhibitions, I'd assume from the outside looking in, you're thinking through the exhaustion you're going to feel
Yes.
through these different things. So how do you structure that somewhat? Like, are there certain feats that you save to the end because you're like, oh
For
man,
sure.
like this is going to burn me out? So can you speak to that at all? Like, what do you
Hmm.
want? What do you want to try to front load? What do you try to put towards the end as like a grand finale?
Well, you definitely want a finale.
Yeah,
You want to end with a crowd pleaser. All of it should be crowd pleasing, but you know what I mean. Like
yeah,
the
sure,
end should be like the big one.
absolutely.
But also, it has to be something you can do.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. You don't
there
want to
is,
fail that finale.
in my opinion, and maybe I'm wrong, but in my opinion, I think people would rather see you do something easy and do it. They might say, "Oh, well, that wasn't that hard," but they would rather see that than you do something incredibly difficult and fail.
Yeah,
Like nobody wants to watch you
in
fail.
that environment of a performance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you are much better off just saying, okay, I'm going to bring this way back and do
Yeah,
something
yeah,
ridiculously easy and nail it than to be like, well, I'm going to gamble this and get out there and not be able to do it.
yeah,
That is the worst thing you can do, in my opinion. Um, you will get eaten alive
yeah,
for not being able to do something. And I think a lot of people that lift struggle with that because they want to go out and hit a PR on stage, but it's not a
sure.
competition. You have to, you can't do it, you can't think of it that way
Yeah.
because in a competition you can miss.
And
And
sometimes if you put forth, you really grind it out and miss, the crowd still applauds at a competition, you know, if
yeah,
there is a crowd, they still appreciate that.
yeah, in an exhibition, if you got something tough and you're grinding it out, um, they will appreciate that. But you have to finish,
Yeah.
and you can't take too long.
Uh-huh.
Um, in a competition, that's usually already dictated because it's like you got 60 seconds, 90 seconds,
Yeah.
maybe 2 minutes, depending on what the thing is. Um, in the exhibitions, because it's up to you, I've seen people do shows where they do something and it take them 10 minutes and you've already lost the crowd.
Yeah.
So that's something you have to plan a lot of this out. So I like to, and I rein everything back, and that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. Is like, well, I'm
Yeah.
not doing anywhere near my max in these shows on
Uh-huh.
any lift, because like you said, I might have to do 10
Yeah.
different feats. Well, that 10th one's the most important,
Yeah.
and so I have to be able to do that. So I'm not going to blow my load 9 times
Yeah. Yeah.
and then get there and be screwed. Um, so yeah, for sure. And that also, but I think it depends how your mindset is. Everything is mindset.
Uh-huh.
But if you realize that and you say, man, I got to rein all this stuff back and do like 80% of what I'm capable of, um, then you're going to train a lot harder because you go, man, all I get to display is my 80%. So my
Yeah.
80% better be better than most people's 100%.
Exactly.
You have to think of it that way.
Sure.
So you'll start leveling up quick because you're like, you might hit a PR and be like, oh, I'm super strong. I'm a bad dude.
Yeah.
But then you got to think, but I'm not going to do that on stage.
Well, consistency, yeah. That, like, if I hit a PR, it's still pretty shaky whether I can do that again and again and again and again, you know?
Yeah.
So,
And again, for a competition, I'm probably crazy. Competition, I do not care about getting hurt.
Yeah.
I will go out and
Yeah.
I mean, that's just what it's the game, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're putting it on there for a win.
Yeah.
In an exhibition, it's for me, total different mindset.
Yeah.
I cannot get hurt.
Sure.
I don't want to get hurt doing that. I don't
Yeah.
want to get an injury. I don't want. It's just going to set you back. It's going to look terrible.
Yeah.
You hurt yourself in front of the crowd.
Especially if it's
show's
like the
over.
second
Yeah, the
event.
second.
You're like, well, I hope you enjoyed these 3 minutes.
Yeah, and you know they
But
a
now
lot
my
of
arm hurts.
a lot of times they paid or you're getting paid
Yeah.
to do this. It's not like strongman competition. I'm an amateur. I'm paying.
Yeah.
If I get hurt,
Oh, well, you
whatever.
just walk away. Yeah.
But if they're paying to see me and I get
Yeah.
hurt,
You've been
what did they
hired.
pay for?
Exactly.
So it's not an option for me. So like I said, I'm bringing everything I do back to like 80%. 80% is a real safe range.
So what type of events would be like the grand finale type of events?
Okay, I think I can. I think it's been long enough I can talk about this.
Okay.
But we did America's Got Talent.
Oh, cool. Cool.
A little over a year ago, and so they put us in time constraint. It's a real crazy experience. But for our big finale there, Hannah did a backbend,
Okay.
and we put a
Is this your wife?
girlfriend.
Girlfriend.
We put a cinder block on her, so she's bridged
Okay.
up,
Gotcha.
and then I busted it with a sledgehammer.
Nice.
So that's like a big finale finish, and
Sounds like
it's
it.
cool because like there's no way I'm going to be so exhausted I can't break the.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
So that's like really well thought. I'm bragging here, but that was really well thought out
Well,
finale.
it's
I think.
strategic, yeah.
And it is definitely a crowd pleaser.
Plus, in the back of your mind, throughout the other events, you know that, okay, all I have to do is swing this sledgehammer and not miss.
Right. Yeah, not miss.
But
right.
in terms of
Yeah.
strength, I just have to swing it hard enough to break this block, so you can gauge how much you're putting out
Yeah.
in the events prior to it. That's sounds like a crowd pleaser. So
It is very much a crowd pleaser, and that is something that I think if you get into old time strongman
uh-huh.
and you're actually doing the shows, because there are some people that do it and don't do the shows,
Yeah, they just-
and that's a different mentality
Sure.
too. And I've trained people that do that, and you just have to. It's different mentality. I don't have anything against it, but it's different.
Uh-huh.
But when you're actually going to do a show, the crowd is who you're catering to,
Uh-huh.
and whatever you think is impressive or I think is impressive,
Yeah.
there's probably something much more trivial that is not difficult at all, but that crowd will be like, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. And that sometimes that can be hard mentally for people to wrap their head around.
Yeah.
Because the crowd, normal non-lifting people, have a totally different outlook and concept of what's going on.
Uh-huh.
For instance, I could go out and I can't actually do this, but I could go out and duct tape 10 Iron Mind red nails together and bend that thing, and the crowd would, oh, he bent some steel.
Yeah.
But if Hannah goes out with me and picks me up on her shoulders and walks across the stage, which is nothing for her,
Yeah.
they lose their minds. They think that was the
Well,
most impressive thing.
What you're speaking to, I think, is the biggest connection between old time strongman and modern strongman, which would be relatable visuals.
Yes.
That it's something that, because old time strongman realized that, like, picking up weights, yeah, it has to look big,
Right.
for the crowd to see it because they're not feeling it. So
Right,
it has to look big, and it's even better if it's something they can relate to. If
Yes.
Sandow puts a pony on his shoulder, well, a crowd knows that a pony weighs a lot.
Right.
And if,
Yeah.
Saxon has a car drive up on him, a car weighs a lot. People
Yeah.
can visually see that. So, like, even walking in your gym, I saw a fire hydrant out there. That's perfect. People can see, like, holy crap, this dude's throwing around a fire hydrant. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that relatable visual, which I think World's Strongest Man and other strongman competitions in modern era do that as well.
Yeah,
right?
they do a good job.
A truck pull, you're not just pulling weight on a sled, you're pulling a truck.
Right.
Because people are like, holy crap, a truck weighs a lot.
Yeah, and that's a good example. Like the sled could be harder,
Yeah.
but who knows?
But people don't know that unless
Yeah.
they train and they use it or whatever.
But I think a lot of when you start lifting and stuff, you kind of get you get in that bubble
Yeah.
and you think, well, this is hard. People want to see
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
or it's hard to kind of break free and be like, wait a minute, how did I think before I started
yeah,
doing
yeah.
this? And that's what you're after, is what the normal person that hasn't really lifted, what, like you said, relatable visuals, and what can they relate to, and what are they going to like to see, and what do they think is just
Like
extraordinary.
one of your recent reels I liked, you were in a barber shop and
Yeah.
you bent a hammer.
Hmm.
So like, yeah, you could have bent a piece of steel, which still would have been like, holy crap, he's bending steel. But on the other hand, most of those people in the barbershop had probably swung a hammer at some point in their life. A hammer is a pretty common item in a home or garage or something. So then seeing you bend that sucker was like,
Yeah.
holy crap, he just bent a hammer in half.
I think the thing about that sort of thing, like hammers, wrenches, um, versus like just a piece of steel, right?
Uh-huh.
A piece of steel is just a piece of steel. Uh, Somebody may not even know what the purpose of that steel was. It's just a piece of steel, and you bend it, and you go, yeah, that was steel. But a hammer, in the back of your mind, you automatically think someone made that, and they made it so that it wouldn't bend or break.
Yeah.
Because if you bought a hammer that was supposed to bend or break, it wouldn't work very
Yeah,
well.
exactly.
So you have that in the back of your mind, whereas
Sure.
a flat piece of steel, it's like, what was that made for? There's nothing telling you that shouldn't bend
Yeah.
necessarily. But a hammer or a wrench, it shouldn't bend.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
And people
I think it's
recognize
cool.
that. Yeah.
So then you said you had the seminar, and that kind of sent you really
Yes.
on your way, Dennis Rogers' seminar. But then you you couldn't have learned all this stuff in that one weekend. So
No.
what kind of things have you learned just trial and error? Like for example, walking on glass, walking
Okay.
on tacks. You know, were you able to watch anything before that or see anything before that, or were you just kind of like, well, let's see what happens here?
Um, well, so we trained with Dennis, did the seminar. Uh, that's probably about the time that Instagram was
Uh-huh.
starting to get popular. I got on Instagram.
Okay.
I discovered um, Bud Jeffries was one of the
Yeah.
first people,
Oh man, God
um,
bless him. Yeah,
and
Bud Jeffers is so great.
Bud immediately became like a goal.
Uh-huh.
Like, I want to be this guy. This is like,
Yeah.
this guy's doing the stuff that I want to do. Um,
And he's
and
passed away, listeners, if you don't know, but his account's still up. So if
mhm.
you check out Bud Jeffries on Instagram, you can see some just phenomenal. I mean, sometimes I would like lose track of time going through some of the stuff he would post, and yeah,
Yeah,
he was cool.
and he was trained by Dennis, and so I started following him and seeing stuff. And I've been lucky. I'm a very visual learner.
Uh-huh.
I can see stuff and be like, oh, I see what's going on here,
Yeah.
And so I would copy some of his stuff, and then I started jumping around Instagram and finding different people.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I started doing the steel bending championships.
Okay.
Discovered Don Cummins. I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot from all the guys that go out and compete in that. Um, at some point, I hired Chris Ryder,
Okay.
Hercules.
Yeah.
Um, he's also a student of Dennis and
Uh-huh.
Slim the Hammerman. Uh, and he taught me a bunch of stuff.
Okay.
Chris is first of all, he's a phenomenal teacher and instructor.
Uh-huh.
I mean, top notch. And he knows not even just about old time strongman. He's like this wise wizard that just knows stuff about stuff.
Yeah.
And, but he showed me all kinds of stuff,
That's a
like,
pretty good compliment for a coach. A wise wizard.
yeah, like for real. I mean, incredible.
Yeah.
And he showed me all these different ways to do stuff, and kind of
Okay.
different ways to think about stuff. And and he's super cool. He doesn't seem to have like a governor to hold him back. When I bring up some goals of mine that were probably anybody else would be like, "What are you? That's crazy."
Yeah.
He would be like, "Yeah, we can work on that." And so I thought that was always cool. But then I started. I remember Dennis Rogers told me that how he got good at his stage shows
Uh-huh.
was hanging out with magicians.
Oh.
He's friends with
Right.
David Blaine or Chris Angel or one of those guys.
Like a big
And
time professional
yeah,
magician.
and they did some shows
Oh
together.
wow.
And he
Okay.
said that by watching them, he learned how to handle a crowd and do stuff.
Interesting.
And whereas my stage stuff kind of comes from pro wrestling, his came from
Uh-huh.
magicians. So I started watching some videos of magicians and like how they're
Yeah.
not how they're doing the magic, but how they're pandering to the crowd and playing the crowd and
How
stuff.
they speak with the
And
crowd and how they build up to
and even their
stuff.
mannerisms and
That
stuff.
makes sense. Yeah.
And so that's where somewhere along the line I came across glass walking.
Okay.
And I immediately knew just from pro wrestling, because you can see I got a barbed wire bat up there.
Oh,
That's from my pro wrestling days.
It's like Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Negan, the barbed wire bat. Yeah.
So I was used to getting hit with that or holding that or whatever,
Okay.
barbed wire. And I did some. It was dumb, but I did some death matches in Huntington.
Okay.
And you're getting hit with light tubes and glass everywhere.
It's like that Mickey Rourke movie, The Wrestler,
Yes.
where it's like it's almost, at least, I don't know if it's true, you can speak to it, but in that movie, it presented that like at the lower rungs of wrestling, the lower levels of wrestling, there was like more like, well, we got to bleed, we got to cut it
Yeah.
up, we got to, there's going to be some broken glass and stuff.
For sure.
That might not be the regular when it comes to stuff you see on TV these days.
Yeah. So. And the deathmatch thing was really blowing up at that point.
Okay.
I mean, there are like pro wrestling, like legendary pro wrestlers only in that little deathmatch bubble. But I was rolling around in glass and stuff. So I was
So
like,
you had some prior glass experience.
yeah, at that point, I'm like, well, I'll walk on it. I get hit in the head with it. I'll walk on it,
Yeah.
So we figured out how that works.
Okay.
And I got it over there. So I got a bin full of glass. And, it was.
I'm just laughing because in your home gym, and yeah, listeners, if you don't subscribe to my YouTube channel, Vintage Rights PGH, head over there so you see a gym tour because yeah, you might be the only home gym that has like a bin of glass, broken glass,
So then
purposefully.
I was like, well, I used to do matches with thumbtacks. I'll do that. So I bought a thing. I think I bought 10,000 thumbtacks off Amazon and threw them down and walked on that. And we're going to do. Hannah does all this too.
Okay.
We're going to do hot coals here real soon.
I was gonna ask because I know you're like blowing fire.
Mhm.
So then I was gonna ask like, well, you're walking on glass, you're blowing fire. It seems like hot coals will be in the future here.
Yeah.
So I mean, the episode of The Office where they walk on coals is about all I know of walking on coals.
I haven't done it yet.
So I imagine you can't get burned, but yeah, we'll see. So that's a future endeavor.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I just read a few months ago, I think Tony Robbins, the motivational guy.
Yeah.
He does that walking on coals as part of his
That's
thing.
where I think The Office kind of got some of that shtick that it was going to be a motivational thing.
Well, I guess recently he did one, and a bunch of people did get burned.
Oh, jeez.
And it was like a big thing, I guess.
Well,
so.
Well, what you were saying about like, hey, you can't fail the grand finale. Well, I think he might have failed the grand finale.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's one of those. You don't want to be walking and
Like,
oh God, take off running.
Suddenly, all the motivation left that experience for those people. Well, I hope no one got seriously injured. I didn't know that, so yeah. On a serious note, hope they didn't get seriously injured, but it is a hot bed of hot coals. So, in addition to that, do you have any other feats of strength you're kind of eyeing up? I mean, you don't have to reveal too much, but anything else you want to kind of do in the future or that's in the back of your mind that you're like, yeah, that'd be cool?
Well, I want to do some of the manhood stones.
Okay.
Over in Scotland or Iceland. I'd like to hop over there.
Well, that's Indiana Stones. Actually, at the time of recording with you, the previous episode hasn't dropped yet. So when it does drop, I'll send it to you.
Okay, yeah.
We get into a lot of that because his inspiration was like Full Sturker and the Icelandic stones, and he also the Scottish stones, and that's what inspired him. That like, wait a minute, like these stones are here geographically, these stones are here geographically. I'm in Ireland. How do we not have any stones? And then when he started looking, he figured out, oh, we do. Like, it just needs to be revealed. So that was his mission.
Oh, cool.
So he's writing a book that'll be published hopefully soon about the Irish stones.
Oh, awesome.
But he has a huge Instagram, page with lots of them. So that'll involve some traveling. You're gonna you're gonna need some sponsorship. Need some, need some some push on that. So any of the small companies and things like that are listening. If you want to send this man to go lift some awesome historic stones, reach out to the Viking, reach out to Mauser.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that.
That'd be cool.
I'd really like to get do the Denny stones, and
Yeah.
I think the Scottish stones have slightly more appeal to me. I think,
Mhm.
but I'm not going to turn down a chance to go tackle the
Anywhere.
Husafell stone or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
But the Scottish stones seem to me to be slightly cooler.
I really like the Scottish stones and the stories behind them. Same with the Icelandic ones, but a good number of Scottish stones are located at restaurants and taverns and inns. And
Hmm.
I've thought to myself, if I take my family, I have 4 kids,
Yeah,
that'll be a lot more appealing. At least we can get lunch while Dad tries this thing, you
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah,
So that's been appealing to me. Or I could have a beer afterwards, you know,
yeah.
and celebrate. So yeah, I think Denny stones would be amazing. One of your clients, a friend of mine, Mark, you coach Mark.
Hmm.
He's done the Denny stones,
Yes.
which is incredible. So through Mark and hearing from one of your clients that you coach, I mean, he loves having you as a coach. You know, when did that happen in terms of your career? When did you start coaching people?
So when I started college, I went to Potomac State, and I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do. They
Uh-huh.
say everybody changes their major, and I was no
Yeah.
different. So I started as athletic training,
Okay.
which is kind of like physical therapy, but on field,
Yeah.
uh, like emergency physical therapy,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
which is cool. I would actually, I
I
have a lot of
remember
interest in that still.
some of my college friends did that. And I remember it was cool because I went to University of Pittsburgh. I remember at like pick games, sometimes we'd see them down there. And we're
Mm,
like, holy crap, like there he is.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
he's out there.
And I still have interest in that, but they didn't have the coaching program
Okay.
there, so I did athletic training, and luckily all the credits and everything carried over. But when I transferred to here, to WVU, and I was talking to my advisor, I said I really want to do like a strength conditioning program,
Uh-huh.
and they said, well, we don't have that as a major, but we just started this minor program, and I was friends with the guy that was the head of it anyway,
Yeah.
and so I changed major to athletic coaching education,
Yeah.
which is all about learning how to coach. So a lot of people don't know that about me or maybe coaching in general. But um, when you go through the coaching program, you learn how to coach anybody for anything. It's
Gotcha.
not a specific like, oh, you're coaching for football. You're
Yeah. Yeah.
so we learned about like not every sport. I mean, there's millions of sports, but we
Yeah.
learned about most sports, and we
Uh-huh.
had different referees come in, different coaches, and we would talk, and we had to do these internships for all these different sports.
Uh-huh.
So I've had experience with, I mean, almost everything. I've
That's
coached
awesome.
hockey players, MMA guys,
Yeah.
um, the rowing teams I've
That's
trained,
so cool.
the military, all kinds of stuff. Um, so I did in college. I got a degree in athletic coaching education, and I minored in strength and conditioning, and
Uh-huh.
then I did the personal training minor as well.
So you stacked it all up.
Yeah, so I
Nice.
just did all that at once,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how I learned how to coach and get into it. And when I was doing those internships, you had to coach people.
Okay.
Um, and then when I was kind of getting out and about to graduate,
Uh-huh.
there was they just demolished the building last year, but there was a Stansbury Hall downtown. It had this old gym in it, which you would have
Okay.
loved. It had
Yeah.
like all this
I was
vintage
gonna
stuff. It was
say,
really
you're
cool.
speaking my language. That's
Super
awesome.
old gym.
Yeah.
And I mean, you would have loved it. And I got lucky enough. They had me teaching classes there, but then they hired me.
Oh,
So I
nice.
became the morning manager, and then I got to teach
Okay.
classes, and then they would let me do personal training there. So then I started
That
doing
racked up a lot of
one-on-ones,
experience. Yeah.
and that's how it all got started. And I started with general population.
Uh-huh.
I wasn't training strongman. I was
Yeah, yeah.
mostly, I got a banged up knee and PT let me go. What can I do to make sure I never hurt my knee again, kind of
Yeah.
stuff, or
Yeah.
I need to lose. My doctor said I need to lose 30
Uh-huh.
pounds. So I was doing a lot of that stuff. And then they got rid of that. Like I said, they got rid of the gym. Eventually, they destroyed the building altogether. So then I was out on my own,
Yeah.
and I applied to a couple gyms. Um, I don't think they like the way I look. so, so I was like,
Yeah.
well, I guess I'll just start my own business.
Yeah.
And then I just started doing it on my own,
Very
and I
cool.
contracted out of gyms in the
Uh
area.
huh.
So I just pay the gym a percentage of what I
Yeah.
make.
Yeah. To use
And
the facility.
and like I said, the guy that ran the strength and conditioning minor program was Jerry Handley,
Okay.
and he opened Viking Performance Training, the
Uh,
gym in town.
okay.
So I contracted out of there. I still do a little bit
Uh-huh.
I started doing that. And then COVID hit, and this is the beginning of the home gym era.
Yeah. Yeah.
So COVID hit, and all the gyms were shut down.
Yeah.
And Jay's really smart, so he figured out the ways to stay open,
Uh-huh.
but they were closed for a couple of weeks.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, man, I can't be
Yeah.
out of work for
Yeah.
weeks. The ship will sink.
Yeah.
So I had to figure something out. So I was like, well, I'll just set, and I lived in a different spot. It's like, I'll just set the garage up and train people out of there.
Yeah, one of Mark's biggest compliments of you was your versatility and what you taught him during COVID in terms of versatility and like, all right, just this is what we got to do to get some training in, and that's it sounds like you really you were improvising to the best of your abilities and to great success.
Yeah, I always think I'm like the MacGyver of strength
Exactly.
training, but so then I started training people out of my garage, and it worked so well
That's awesome.
that that's my focus now. I still train
Very
a few
cool.
couple people over at the gym, but the majority of it happens right here.
Nice.
And then also during COVID, people couldn't go to the gyms,
Uh-huh.
so I was like, man, my online clients are going to get hit. But it actually that was a big shift because most of my stuff was in person.
Yeah.
And when COVID hit, I was able to move most stuff online. And that
Gotcha.
really blew my online presence up and my online training.
Yeah.
And, obviously there was a bit of learning to that
Yeah.
in the beginning. But I had to be super resourceful because people couldn't go to the gym and a lot of
Uh-huh.
people didn't have equipment at home.
Yeah.
And I
Because
remember,
it happened pretty suddenly in terms of like the shutdown,
yeah,
and then that's when, having already been really used to the used market and searching for vintage weights, the vintage weights community, it's like we were watching everyone else in the world suddenly try to do what we've been doing for years.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Suddenly everybody was shopping online for home gym stuff. Suddenly, weights that would cost 50 cents a pound or $5 a pound.
yeah, they skyrocketed.
It was crazy. It was such a crazy time on the used market.
But so yeah, so some stuff was going for nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, the cheapest you find some of the deals you'd never
Yeah.
even find now.
Yeah.
But most stuff was like astronomical.
Yeah.
Just as an example, I used to have the Bigfoot on it kettlebell.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I love that thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I saw what they were
They're
going
expensive.
for, and I was like, I'm gonna put this thing on eBay and see what happens.
Yeah, yeah.
And it sold for $750.
That's wild.
And I didn't
Yeah.
do not. It wasn't. I didn't say I wanted $750.
Yeah, yeah.
I put it up as auction,
Uh-huh.
and that's what it went for.
That's where it went.
And I really like that kettlebell, but $750, it's gone. you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And so stuff was really expensive, but I would scour Marketplace and
Yeah.
eBay and stuff. And I remember coordinating. I have a lot of clients in Ohio. I would coordinate on Marketplace,
Uh-huh.
or I would literally buy stuff and drive it to my client and be like,
Nice.
here, use this.
Yeah.
Or I would send them links.
Yeah.
So I had to like figure out how to get stuff to all these people so they
Yeah.
could use it. Or I would literally be like, send me a video of everything in your house, and I will figure out what
Yeah.
you could lift.
Yeah, we're gonna piece
And-
this together.
Yeah, and I would
Yeah.
then come up with this stuff. But you can get strong doing anything.
Yeah.
A lot of people
Sure.
think you have to, well, I got a powerlifting meet. I have to squat, deadlift, but you don't necessarily have to.
I love doing, I mean, it's for my little children, but if I see something heavy and I can try to pick it up, it's a frequent dad thing that they're
Yes.
used to, that like they know dad's going to try to pick up this whatever sign that fell down at the park. Like, of course he's going to try to pick it up. So yeah, I like a little feat of strength with my children, you know? So it's, yeah, you can lift whatever. So before we wrap up, I want to go back to America's Got Talent. So
Okay.
which, if you can talk about what shook out from there, like, is there a certain threshold to like make it on the show that they play, or is that
Yeah,
known to you at all? You know?
I'm not 100% sure what I'm allowed to talk about, but
Yeah,
I'm just going to say it.
yeah.
Whatever happens, happens. But
Well, with our mighty 300 person viewership, I think you'll be okay.
all
So,
right,
but
fair
I
enough.
appreciate you listeners. You know, I see you. So, yeah.
So I think they told us like 100,000 people apply,
Wow.
and we actually applied really late because we didn't know it was a thing.
Yeah.
I didn't know you could just apply to that. I mean, I don't know what I thought, how you got in.
Yeah.
Now that
Yeah.
I think about it,
Yeah.
it makes sense, but I just didn't. I never put two and two
Yeah.
together. I just thought, oh, there's people on that show.
Yeah. And I do
I
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought, how do I get on there?
Yeah.
But we were looking for bookings for our exhibitions,
Cool.
and Hannah was joining these um, entertainer group,
Yeah.
performer group things, and somebody in there was talking about, yeah, I applied to America's Got Talent in the forum,
Nice.
and she asked him, was like, how, and she sent the link. It's right on the website. You can just
Yeah.
apply. So she applied and got this email back, and it was like, we're not taking anybody for this year. It'll be like 9 months down the
Yeah.
road if we accept you. Well, like a week later, they messaged
That's
us,
awesome.
and we were like, oh,
It's
wow,
great.
out of nowhere,
Yeah.
like we didn't
Yeah.
have any time to prepare. And they're like, hey, we're filming in like, it wasn't very long, like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And they're like, can you send us like a video of like kind of what you would do? Here's your time limit.
Yeah.
So we would send them stuff, and they would message us back and be like, yeah, we like this, or we don't like this, or switch this in, switch that out. And
Yeah.
so we came up with kind of our performance,
Yeah.
and they gave us, different music selections we could pick to play during the performance and stuff. They paid to fly us out
That's
there.
awesome.
They housed us, super cool.
Yeah.
They offered to get us, like, we used some sledgehammers and stuff. They offered to buy all that when we got there, and I was like, I'll just bring it. So we brought most things, except the cinder block.
Yeah.
Getting that on the plane would
You,
have been,
you put
this
the.
is my carry-on.
I love that out of all the things, you were like, all right, you can pick up the $5 cinder block, guys.
Yeah, I know. In retrospect, I'm like, they got millions. I should have just had them buy me a new hammer.
Yeah.
But, I'm just not built that way.
Yeah.
And
No, it's all good. But that's awesome. What a cool experience. I mean,
so we went out and did the show. It's it is crazy. It is one of the most, and I'm not knocking it at all. This
yeah,
is
yeah.
one of the most organized and disorganized things.
Yeah.
I mean, on one end, it's like you would see the machine churning, and you would
Yeah.
be like, "This is like the coolest. Like how? Like I couldn't do this.
Yeah.
Like who's in charge of this? This is
Yeah.
amazing." And then on the other hand, you'd be like, "Who's in charge here?"
Yeah.
Like just
All the
crazy
people
how.
to produce something of that level is got to be insane. You know, the work that goes into it has got to be insane. So then, you know, when you say that, you know, you're not sure to talk about things like that, I don't think you've said anything you shouldn't say. But there's a chance that after this point, people could see you on the show.
Yeah, so
Okay. So if listeners, you know, like what they heard on this episode, tune into America's Got Talent, you might just recognize someone.
yeah, so like I said, 100,000 people apply, and they took 200,
Wow.
and somehow we made the 200,
That's awesome, man.
which I thought was cool.
Yeah, congrats on
I'm
that.
competitive, so
Just
I
that
was like,
alone
yes.
is pretty amazing. Yeah, that's awesome, man.
So then they had everybody go out there, and I think we stayed out there probably almost a week,
Wow.
and they filmed. And then eventually they called us and was like, because we were just hanging out in the hotel, and
Yeah.
this is in Pasadena,
Yeah.
and eating and just watching
gig.
pro wrestling, and hanging out waiting for the call. And they called us eventually, and we went down, and we had to sit there all day, and they fed us and stuff. And then they kind of prepped us, and they did all these photo shoots and all
Yeah.
these little video vignettes, and
Yeah.
interviewed us like this multiple times.
Yeah, I've seen the show before. So they're filming all the background stuff that they're
Mhm.
going to put in. Yeah.
And then at the end, they had 1,000 people studio audience, and they bring you out and you do the show. Terry
That's
Crews
awesome.
is there,
Yeah.
and Howie and all those guys.
That's awesome.
And you go out and do the thing, and then you leave, and they film some more, and then you're done. And from there, from the 200 people that performed, from what I understand, they go back to this room with this giant table, and they have like pictures of everybody.
Yeah.
And if you got the what is it, circles or exit, like when they vote you
When
in.
they vote, yeah.
Yeah, when they vote you in, you're more likely to go on to phase two. And
Gotcha.
phase two is live performances in Vegas.
Ah,
Um, and this is the weird part. The show isn't. It's still entertainment.
uh-huh.
So like they can vote you in because we got all 4 yeses.
Nice.
Like all the judges voted us in,
Yeah, yeah.
but we didn't make it to stage two.
Ah,
So there's some the producers make some
yeah.
executive decisions
Gotcha.
on things. We were considered because they called us and asked us a bunch of questions and interviewed us on the phone multiple times.
Yeah.
We just didn't make it to the second
Yeah.
stage, but they did tell us that we can reapply anytime
That's
and,
cool.
and redo the show.
Yeah, do like a
as
different
long as
act.
we made the cut again.
Yeah.
So we may end up trying to get back out and do it again at some point.
Very cool.
But they have all these legal things where you can't talk about it for a year, and you can't go on any other TV shows for a year. And I hate reading paperwork, so I don't know what I'm allowed to talk about or not. But if I get sued, I get sued.
At a base level, has it been a year since then?
Yeah,
For
it's
us
been
sitting down right now?
Yeah, it's been over a year.
Then you should be pretty
yeah.
good.
So
Yeah.
I think we're fine.
Then we'll be all right. Because this is edited, but man, I don't want to edit that much.
Yeah, no, it's
All
fine.
right, cool.
If they come after me, they come after
Yeah.
me. But
So then I mean, all in all though, from 100,000 down to 200 had to feel good.
yeah,
And what a cool experience just to go out there for a week and just see, behind the scenes how this all works.
yeah,
For a guy like yourself that has that performance aspect to what you do, that is cool. So listeners, check that out. Stay tuned, see what you can see. But like I said earlier in the episode, Forgotten Strength 101 on Amazon. The link will be in the description, or you can just search for it on there. And you can find the Viking, John Mauser, on Instagram. We'll have his link down there. Anything else, to plug or promote?
just the coaching. I
Coaching,
coach
yeah.
general strength training
Yeah.
for strongman, old time strongman. I do all that stuff. So anybody that's interested in
Cool.
anything strength related, I'm the guy.
Well, hey, thanks so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, all that happy stuff. I'm Rob from Vintage Weights PGH. Thanks so much, John.
Yeah,
Appreciate
pleasure.
it, man.